Hello and welcome back to the Breaking Muscle podcast. I'm your host, Tom McCormick, and today I'm going to be talking about building muscle as you age. This is a solo podcast episode, so it's just me talking you through all the available research and my experience and tips I have for you to stay strong, healthy, muscular and lean for as long as possible. Right, let's dive into this and let me tell you about what got me thinking about this and why it'd be a useful podcast. Well, number one, for anyone who's past their 40th birthday, I think this could be very, very helpful. But I have clients I've been working with for more than 10 years. Some actually closing in on 16 or 17 years, and obviously through that time they've aged, but they still want to look their best, perform their best, and the great thing is that many of them are doing just as well now in their 60s, in fact in their 70s, as they were much younger in life. But it is common knowledge that we lose muscle mass and strength as we age, and this is known as sarcopenia. So let me quickly define sarcopenia. It's defined as a progressive and generalized skeletal muscle disorder involving the accelerated loss of muscle mass and function that is associated with increased adverse outcomes, including falls, functional decline, frailty, and mortality. So it sounds basically pretty crappy, right? We want to avoid sarcopenia. Now, for a project I was working on recently, they asked me to delve into the research on sarcopenia to see what, if anything, could be done to reverse or at least slow down the physical decline we go through as we age. Now, what I discovered was fascinating, and as someone approaching their 40th birthday, it was also a massive relief. Let me explain what I discovered and give you some practical tips that can help you to stay healthy and strong for as long as possible. Firstly, let's get the bad news out of the way. We do tend to lose muscle mass, strength, power, coordination, and general athleticism, and many other markers of fitness as we age. But the good news is this rate of decay in physical capacity is not inevitable. There is much you can do to slow the process down. In fact, you can completely prevent it for quite some time, which was when I dug into the research and I saw that, it was a massive relief for me, and I'm sure it's a relief for you. Now, in this episode, I'm going to explain how. First, let's get some more details covered and provide a complete picture of the influence of aging on strength and muscle mass. So as I said, the scientific name for muscle loss as we get older is sarcopenia. And our testosterone levels also drop as we age, which is one of the factors involved in this. And it is reported that they drop by about 1 to 2% each year after the age of 30. That sucks, but it affects us all. So, there's no point moaning about it. We probably want to think, what can we do about it? And I imagine you are probably interested in what you can expect as you get older. And at what age does sarcopenia set in? Is there an indicator of what age it will set in for you? How bad is it when it does? Is it inevitable, or is there something you can do to prevent or at least slow it down? Well, I've done the research and I've got all the answers for you. Well, certainly most of the important answers for you. Spoiler alert. The good news is that you can avoid the rapid decline in strength and muscle mass if you implement some key habits. Whilst it's common to hear that after you turn 30, everything goes downhill, this belief is supported by the fact that most top athletes or popular sports stars in their 20s, reach their peak in their 20s. And I think that's partly why we will think about, it's all downhill after 30, because you look at elite level athletes and there's not that many of them past their 30s. So it seems like pretty compelling evidence, right? The peak of physical performance is illustrated by our athletes, but there actually is a lot more to it than that. Now, those stats about the peak athletes or the data that's showing the average athletes in their 20s might seem alarming, but you shouldn't give up hope. The age of peak physical performance varies substantially from one sport to another, and the range is pretty wide, with some sports favouring athletes in their late teens or early 20s, while on other sports actually the athletes in their 40s are in their prime. And the great news for us meatheads and gym rats is that in most sports that are heavily dependent upon strength and muscle mass, athletes actually tend to peak later in life, so that's great news. For example, powerlifters reach their prime on average at age 35, and in bodybuilding, many of the all-time greats weren't at their best until they were in at least their 30s, and Ronnie Coleman was still winning Olympia titles in his 40s. Phil Heath is still at the top of the sport, competitive right at the top level in his 40s, and many athletes like Jay Cutler, Dorian Yates, Lee Haney and Arnold Schwarzenegger So the greats of bodybuilding were winning titles in their 30s and well into their 30s. If we look at different sports, there are some people that can provide us with hope. So Tom Brady is an obvious example of someone who has continued to improve physically past their 40th birthday. If you're into football, or as you may well know it as soccer, but if you're into soccer, you'll maybe know Cristiano Ronaldo and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and they're two of the most impressive physical specimens within soccer, and they're aged 36 and 39 respectively. So those examples fit closely with the scientific research as well, which shows no relation between age and the rate of muscle growth or strength development between the ages of 18 and 39 years old. And this suggests that it's not a limiting factor in your response to training in any practical way up to the age of 40. Now you might be thinking, what about the age after the age of 40? And as I said, I'll be turning 40 next year. I'm asking myself that same question. Is 40 the end of the line for the gains train? Well, while 40 seems to be something of a barrier to elite level sports performance, it might not be the death sentence for your strength and muscle mass gains. There are numerous reasons why there are so few athletes over the age of 40, and it's not just simply their age. For example, their motivation to train may have reduced after years of grinding away to reach the top. They might even have earned enough money to throttle back and take things easy. They might have family commitments and responsibilities that change their priorities and their focus. They may have suffered injuries which now hold them back, or they might just become complacent, or not really want to do what it takes to be at the top of their game. So it may not just be the fact that they're 40, it may be more a product of the environment of being 40. So the point is, age is not the only factor. It isn't even the most significant factor. Our life choices are far more significant. The decisions we make and the environment we create for ourselves usually make it much, much harder in our 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond. We often find that we want greater financial security, or our costs increase, so we prioritise getting ahead at work, maybe climbing the corporate ladder, and we begin to prioritise the needs of our families at the expense of our responsibility to ourselves to stay active, healthy, fit and strong. You may well be stressed out and overworked. Many of you listening will try to distract or numb ourselves to this reality by staying up later than we should, watching mindless shows, scrolling social media and eating junk food. All habits we know aren't healthy, but we all fall into that trap. Now, this seems unavoidable to a lot of people. They kind of accept their fate and drift into these detrimental habits. And like I said, we've probably all made this mistake, myself included. But the fact is, we are passively settling for a lower quality of life if we make those choices. And they are choices. You can choose to do and be better. It might even seem hard to make these choices, and the choices needed to change your environment, but it is worth it. In fact, there is a vast array of research indicating that you can stay strong, lean and muscular past the age of 40. So, is sarcopenia set in stone? Is rapid muscle loss a given? Are you guaranteed to get weaker every year from the age of 40? Well, firstly, headline act, no. Secondly, more detail. Let's dive in. So, to get a more detailed analysis on when muscle and strength loss is a real concern, you can use the research on sarcopenia as an indicator to start extrapolating from. And this shows that muscle loss in the general population shows a linear decline starting at the age of just 20. Yep, you heard me right. On average, there is a fairly linear decline in muscle mass from the age of 20. So I'm thinking that should have made you sit up and take notice. Like, hang on a minute, we're talking about aging, but most people are losing muscle from 20. What's that about? Well, firstly, screw average. That's what the data in studies is usually the mean. So we're looking at averages, and nobody aims for that. And you should strive for more. I don't blame you. I would expect you to want better. Demand better from yourself and don't settle for average. There is so much you can achieve. So while that available data does in fact actually show muscle mass steady declines as we age, and it starts early, there is some good news coming. I promise. And it's important to note there is not some muscle loss set point. It's not like I hit this age and it dramatically falls off. It's not like an inflection point. Not a sudden breaking point where the human body begins to fall apart. Muscle mass doesn't suddenly start falling off at an alarming rate. Instead, it tends to be a slow, steady and gradual decay over time. And as I said, on average, that happens pretty early. But hang on, that doesn't make sense. You're saying we start losing muscle as early as 20. How can I be in great shape when I'm older than that, and there's loads of guys that are in their 30s, 40s that are in good shape, and you could be forgiven for you're thinking to yourself right now, wait a minute, if I start losing muscle mass in my 20s, like how is it possible that you said two of the best soccer players in the world are nearly 40, and like powerlifters peak at 35, and bodybuilders are winning shows in their 40s, and Tom Brady is the Super Bowl winning MVP at 43? I'm like, it's a fair question. So here's the answer. It's because age is not the primary determinant of muscle loss and strength loss. Just let that filter in. I'll say it again. Age is not the primary determinant of muscle loss and strength loss. So your future could look very different with that knowledge. Rather than accepting the decline, you can fight it. Sarcopenia is not primarily a problem of age. It is in fact primarily a problem of our habits. And some fascinating research involving muscle biopsy suggests that muscle tissue does not suffer from age at all. Indeed, or instead, a scientific review placed the blame for our decline in athletic capacity firmly with our lifestyle choices. So I'm going to quote this. The authors stated that the primary causes of sarcopenia include a sedentary lifestyle and malnutrition. So our lifestyle and our food choices are the primary causes of muscle loss. We allow ourselves to get fat and weak as we age. We are guilty of becoming inactive, sitting on the sofa, stuffing ourselves with junk food, rather than nourishing our bodies and exercising often. These lifestyle choices are more likely the reason for muscle loss than our actual age. We eat like crap, move like crap, look like crap, or many of us do as we get older. So really that's all great news. Like, you are in control. You don't have to let things slide like the average person does. You can stay fit, healthy, lean, muscular, strong, well past your 40s if you commit to doing what it takes, making the right choices, and placing a priority on these. Losing muscle and strength as you age is not inevitable. Being strong for life is a possibility and something you should strive for. And in fact, is well within your control. And if you're still listening to this going, I don't believe this, listen up. I've looked at the research, and here's one example for you. Research in elite masters athletes found no significant loss of lean body mass or strength from the age of 40 to 81 years of age in people that kept exercising. Like, let's be fair, most people are dead at the age of 81, let alone alive and kicking, lifting weights, retaining muscle mass and strength levels, and having a great life. But which one are you going to choose? Which one do you want? Do you want to be weak and feeble or strong and powerful? It's a pretty simple choice when you put it like that. Now, a wide-ranging study on sarcopenia concluded the following, and again, this is a direct quote. These findings contradict the common observation that muscle mass and strength decline as a function of aging alone. Instead, these declines may signal the effect of chronic disuse rather than muscle aging. So, never has the phrase use it or lose it seemed so important, right? So, I'm not disputing that age is a factor, and I think that they'd be naive to think that it isn't, but it isn't a guarantee. It's not just a reason to give up. You can fight this, resist this, and actually get phenomenal results for a long time. And you might be thinking, like, at this point, he's just cherry-picked the data and found like one study to say like what I want to hear and make myself feel better about the fact that I'm going to be 40 soon. Well, you'd be wrong, because multiple scientific studies support that age is not the major cause of frailty in the elderly and does not limit our physical capacity nearly as much as people think. So here's some proof. A 2000 research paper published in 2000 established no difference in muscle growth rates between trainees in their 20s and trainees up to the age of 70. And then one in 2001 by Roth et al. Studied elderly men and women aged 65 to 75 years of age and found they gained just as much muscle as men and women in their 20s during 6 months of strength training. A study conducted in 2009 found a group in their mid-60s gained just as much muscle and strength as a group in their mid-20s during 4 months of strength training. And more recently, research conducted in 2017 found no difference in the rate of muscle and strength development during strength training in 18 to 25-year-olds versus 50 to 65-year-old women. Even in your 90s, your muscle remains responsive to strength training. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to keep making gains if you start training when you're 18 all the way to your 90. But the dramatic drop-off should be slowed down. And if you're late to lifting, basically it's never too late, right? If you've not lifted but you want to get some of these benefits and you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the great news is you can still get almost newbie gains like all those people that started lifting as a teenager did. So, but before we get carried away and think you can just keep growing muscle and gaining strength all the way up until you turn 100, I want to give you a little bit of a reality check. If any of you are thinking I'm just going to be the most jacked 100-year-old ever to win the Mr. Olympia and just step on stage, a 2020 meta-analysis concluded that when we look at all the available studies, muscle growth from strength training does diminish after the age of 60. However, age only explained about 10% of that variance in muscle growth. 90% of the results were due to other factors you are in control of. So you might not make the best gains of your life past the age of 60, but you can still see results, and you should still be making excellent progress past the age of 40 towards 60 and seeing a real dramatic, slower drop-off in levels compared to someone who doesn't train when they're past 60. Now, good strength training combined with proper diet is the fountain of youth, is basically what I've just told you. And the moral of the story is it's never too late to start training, but it is always too early to stop. I like that as a way of thinking. Never too late to start, but it's always too late to stop. So the principles of good training and nutrition apply to everyone, and you just need to keep applying them as your life circumstances change and as you shift, say, from a responsibility-free 20-something to a middle-aged parent and beyond. Principles still apply. How you apply those principles will change a little bit though. So while you want to keep improving, and as I've alluded to earlier, you can keep improving, it's perhaps just as important to prevent the regression in strength and muscle mass that comes with a beat up body from hard training from years and years, especially if you've done some dumb stuff as a youngster. Certainly, like when I started out training, it wasn't the smartest. I'm sure there was some damage done there to my joints. Now, from a practical perspective, what I think that means is that you will need some changes, or probably need some changes to occur to your exact training methods. If you're over 40, or maybe even if you're a bit younger than that and you're in your 30s but you're feeling beat up because of some crappy training choices, you basically have two choices now. Number one, you can keep training like a dumb 20-something, like train recklessly, and you maybe be okay for a few more years, but you'll beat your joints up in the process and then gradually find yourself losing what you have because you aren't able to train any hard anymore because you've caused that damage by training poorly. Or you can recognise that you're not a teenager or in your early 20s anymore. You have more responsibility, more stresses, and your body has taken more of a battering. You make some changes, you still progress, and you keep training and prevent that decay of training well into your 60s and beyond, perhaps even your 70s, 80s, 90s. Now, I know which one I'm choosing. I'm gonna try and train smart and hard so I can train and live the best quality of life for as long as possible. From a training perspective, you should be training to get stronger in the fundamental movement patterns, the squat, the lunge, the hip hinge, the push, the pull, and a carry of sorts. Now, if you want more detail on your approach to training as you age, check out the podcast interview I did with Robert Linkle. Robert is an expert in training the older athlete, and in this episode it was basically crammed full of valuable take-home info you can apply to your own training. He has made a business out of training the older athlete, so full of useful tips if you check out his work and also that podcast interview we did. I'd also urge you, if you're someone who's an older lifter, to focus on your recovery more than ever. Again, for more info on that, I actually wrote a multi-part series for Breaking Muscle on maximising your recovery at the start of this year. If you give those articles a read, I'm pretty confident you'll have all the info you need to optimise your recovery from training. And better recovery equals better results, fewer injuries, and more productive years of training, which means you can get stronger for longer and also delay the decline for longer. So, to highlight though why older lifters need more recovery, consider these factors. So there's hormonal disruption. You get decreases in anabolic hormones like testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1 as you age. Then there's the potential for gradual anabolic resistance, a decrease in the sensitivity of the androgenic receptors that make you less responsive to testosterone, make building muscle that bit building muscle that bit harder as you age. And then life throws loads of crap at you, and you have more responsibilities as you age. Generally, that reduce your time, your energy, your recovery capacity, and your ability to train and recover from training. the other thing to consider is if you have been training for decades, you have more strength than the typical person, certainly than a beginner, and that means you move bigger weights. And this puts more systemic stress on your body. Think of it this way: if you can Romanian deadlift 400 pounds compared to someone who can only do 100 pounds, that's going to take its toll not only on your hamstrings but your whole body to recover. It's any of those big compound movements that you're strong on, they'll dig a big recovery ditch essentially. And so you need to focus on your recovery that little bit more. Another little training tip that we talked about in Robert's episode, and I think is worth following as you age, is to include grip work. Now me and Robert discussed this, but to give you a little bit of background on the benefits of grip training as you age, consider the following info. There is a correlation between grip strength and healthy aging. It's well established, and more grip strength in aging adults is correlated with lower premature mortality, lower development of disabilities, and shorter hospitalisation following injuries and health issues. So overall, there is a good connection between grip strength and higher strength levels. This doesn't mean that increasing grip strength will decrease mortality. Grip strength is only used as a non-dangerous way of assessing strength, really. But what the studies do say, and are pretty clear, is that your overall strength is correlated with healthy aging, and grip strength is a good indicator of your overall strength. So, the other thing to consider is grip work actually has benefits in slowing down the reduction in mental function that comes with aging. Training can help keep your brain healthy. There is indeed a positive correlation between grip strength and mental function in older athletes, and older adults, and grip strength is actually quite highly neurological. If you think of differentiation, your ability, if you sit there, put your hands in front of you, now I bet you can fold your thumb over to touch your palm without anything else moving, and maybe even the next finger, but can you go all the way down to your pinky and fold that over without the rest of your hand moving? Chances are you can't. And it's because the nervous system can't necessarily differentiate between those last two fingers. If we can start using grip strength and developing hand strength in general, and that differentiation, it'll keep the neural pathways young, fresh, healthy, and help you. And because you don't have a huge amount of muscle mass coming into what moves the hands, it's more neurological efficiency rather than muscle mass that makes the factor. So we want to do that. And a good way to think of this and to illustrate it is if you've got your phone there, Google cortical homunculus. I may not have pronounced that properly, but cortical homunculus, and that is homunculus spelled HOMUNCULUS. And essentially what that is it's a distorted representation of the human body based on a neurological map of the areas and the proportions of the human brain where each part of the body is the size relative to the amount of information sent to and from the nervous system. So parts of your body that send more info to the brain are bigger, while those that send less are smaller. Now, I first saw this at the Science Museum in London, and it looks kind of freaky at first, but it very quickly illustrates the point. When you look at it, you'll notice the hands are enormous relative to the rest of the body. If you look at that Google image, you'll see that your hands have the most important connection with your brain and nervous system. By the way, that's why the sign of incoming training burnout is a decrease in grip strength, right? So like a really good indicator of overtraining is grip strength. One of the reasons, because the hands have such a powerful connection with the nervous system. So if you train your hands with high force production stuff like grip work, then you'll get benefits. Another one that I know from a brain health, and this is not my area of expertise, but things like where you need to display that differentiation. I was talking about moving the fingers separately. So like learning to play the guitar, for example, is great for the nervous system, great for brain health. Now, for that reason, I basically think grip work becomes even more important as you age. It may well be able to prevent mental decline and keep your nervous system efficient. And of course, it might help you deadlift more, which is pretty cool too. Right, my final training tip is to do some more sled work. So think about a prowler or pushing and pulling a sled. So back when I started studying under Charles Poliquin, probably 13 years ago, something like that, he was big on emphasising the benefits of modified strongman training, and within that, sled work. And Louis Simmons of Westside Barbell has also highlighted the benefits and got in depth on how it can help powerlifters. And I've personally found it to be a great way for me to train around the knee injury that ended my rugby career. It allows me to train my legs, get some conditioning work in, and all at a very low injury risk. And despite the fact that sled work doesn't involve any eccentric loading and doesn't necessarily work muscle in full range depending on what you're doing, it does still build muscle. And I've seen it with lots of clients who have like nagging injuries, knee pain, lower back pain, that mean they can't squat, deadlift heavy, and they want bigger legs. I've seen it work great. I'm not saying though that you necessarily stop traditional lifting for your leg training. If you don't have injuries like some of those clients that came to me with pre-existing conditions, then you can still train using regular leg training, but and include that in your weekly routine. But I would recommend you maybe reduce the overall volume of that and insert some sled work in there. And the way I program it for a lot of my older clients is we do one traditional leg session per week and then one, maybe 2 days of sled work per week. And those other 2 days aren't necessarily full 60-minute sessions on the sled, but we just utilize the sled for 15, 20 minutes in each one of those sessions. And if you combine like a moderate dose of both traditional lifting and sled work, you'll get the same kind of level of growth as you'd get from just regular bodybuilding style leg training, but you'll massively reduce the injury risk and wear and tear on your joints. And it'll allow you to keep training hard for longer, which is not to be, underrated or undervalued, because as we talked about longevity, if you can keep training for longer, you can stay fit, healthy and strong for longer. And it will also sled work is quite easy to recover from. One of the benefits is it doesn't have that eccentric loading, so that loading with the muscles lengthening under tension. Now because of that, at low levels of eccentric training, you don't get so much muscle damage, you don't get so much soreness, and you can do it quite frequently, which is great. It's also nice as you age not to feel like beaten up from your training sessions. Most people can do a sled workout, it's really tough in the moment, but the next day their legs feel absolutely fine. So I suggest performing sets of around where you push a heavy weight for 30 to 50 meters if your goal is to build muscle. And those sets should be hard. So it's not just like, 30 to 50 meters is magic. You need to treat it like the rest of your training. You should be struggling to complete that distance. Grinding out the final few meters of the 50 should be tough. Now for knee health, I'm particularly keen on that given the injury that I suffered. I've actually found that performing sets of forward pushing and backward dragging to have amazing benefits. Maybe we'll go into detail of exactly why on another article or podcast, but pushing and backward dragging is really, really beneficial. Right, so that's some training tips covered. It's time to move on to nutrition, because you do need to eat right to age right. From a nutrition standpoint, there is some interesting research which is very instructive when it comes to the age-related decline in muscle mass. Excuse me. And a solution that is so simple it almost defies belief, if I'm honest. And that solution quickly is to eat more protein at breakfast and lunchtime. And for older people, if you're working with older clients, this could help older people maintain muscle mass as they age. It's so simple, but it really works, and there is research to support that. Now, as I've mentioned, there is a risk of muscle mass loss as you age, and that rate tends to, if you lose muscle mass, it shortens your life expectancy, so we want to avoid it. And as I said, muscle mass is not only highly correlated with lifespan, but also health span, so the quality of your life as you age, and also your resilience to illness. So if you want a long, healthy and happy life, preserving muscle mass, as I've identified, is crucial and a wise decision, and your dietary choices and training habits can go a long way to determining how successful you are at that. So that simple one about eating protein at breakfast and lunch, I will dive into in a second. But let me give you some more background on why that's important. When we eat protein-containing foods, it stimulates muscle protein synthesis, or MPS. MPS is the process of repairing and rebuilding muscle tissue. As we age, this process becomes less efficient. We do not get the same levels of MPS in response to meals compared to our younger selves. The MPS response to eating protein is blunted, and this is one of the contributory factors even, easy for me to say, to muscle loss past the age of 70. So that kind of anabolic resistance can be somewhat explained by your response to feeding on protein. So whereas 30 grams of protein may have maximised your muscle protein synthesis as a 20-year-old, when you're 70, it may well not do. And to quote a leading researcher in the field, They say, we know that older people show a blunted response to muscle building when consuming a certain amount of protein. Therefore, older individuals need to eat more protein to get the same muscle building response as a younger and middle-aged people. Right, so essentially, the muted MPS response has led to the term anabolic resistance, being used to describe the impact of age on muscle mass. As we age, stimulating new muscle growth and maintaining what we have can become harder, and the body doesn't give us the same muscle building bang for our buck as it used to from a nutritional standpoint. As we've just said, you don't stimulate as much muscle growth from the same quantity of protein as you did as you were younger. And that doesn't mean, though, that you can't retain and gain strength. You just need to be proactive and think about your nutrition. And so that simple tip about eating more protein at breakfast and lunch was largely done on the fact that most people tend to eat their biggest protein meal at the end of the day at dinner and have smaller serving sizes of protein at lunch and breakfast. So the solution is to eat more protein throughout the day. Like I said, protein and at breakfast for a lot of people is quite low, also at lunchtime. And that approach is not enough to overcome anabolic resistance. So even if you have a huge serving, like a massive bolus dose of protein in the evening, it doesn't work to offset missing out earlier in the day. And researchers in the School of Sport, Exercise and Rehabilitation Sciences at the University of Birmingham studied the diets of young, middle-aged and old age, and they paid particular attention to the type, amount and pattern of protein consumption. And the results of their study showed that despite exceeding national guidelines, the RDA, for protein, the distribution of protein across meals was extremely varied. So what I mean by that is when they consume their protein in the day, and it was skewed towards the evening meals. The researchers discovered that the elderly were more likely to consume lower quality protein sources, lower quality protein sources with large quantities of their daily intake coming from trace quantities in foods such as bread, right? We kind of know that bread's not a great source of protein. They weren't consuming high quality complete protein sources like meat, fish, eggs and dairy to the same quantity or what was needed. And to maximise MPS, consuming sufficient protein is important. Consuming high quality protein sources like ones that include all the amino acids, for the essential amino acids like eggs being one, is also very important. Complete protein sources with high levels of leucine should also be prioritised. Leucine is one of the amino acids. It's actually one of the branch chain amino acids. And examples of foods that can achieve that are eggs, chicken, beef, and whey protein. And eating high quality protein sources is good, but to get the biggest muscle building benefits as you age, how you split this intake throughout the day also matters. So splitting your intake evenly across the day in multiple meals seems to have a powerful effect on muscle protein synthesis and overcoming anabolic resistance. Eating a sufficient serving of a complete protein at breakfast, lunch and dinner will go a long way to helping you retain your muscle and staying healthy as you age. So if you're not currently having multiple servings of protein throughout the day, it's something you want to look into. Eating the same total protein but spreading it over multiple meals will maximise your daily MPS much more than eating that same quantity in just one meal. So as I said, just having a huge serving at dinner doesn't make up for it. Now, don't believe me, this is what the researchers concluded. Our results show that a one-size-fits-all guideline for protein intake isn't appropriate across all age groups. Simply saying older people should eat more protein isn't really enough either. We need a more sophisticated and individualized approach that can help people understand when and how much protein to consume to support muscle mass. Here's a quick rule of thumb for you. I would suggest you consume 0.4 grams of protein per kilo of body weight at each meal. So if you weigh 100 kilos, that's 220 pounds, that would be 40 grams. Even as you age, that's probably going to be a pretty good quantity that will give you a good chance of maximising MPS. So try and have that threshold at each meal. You give yourself a really good chance of maximising muscle protein synthesis. So if you combine that with good training, you create the stimulus, and then your nutrition allows you to put that stimulus to use and build or retain muscle and strength. So, we're nearly up on time here. I just want to say that there is hope. If you thought that aging meant you couldn't get jacked, stay lean, muscular and strong, it's not true. You might not be an elite level athlete past your 40th birthday, but you can always stay strong, muscular and lean for many decades to come after the 40th birthday. Give your body what it needs. Stay lean and fit, and it will serve you for many decades for a long and muscular life. If you apply the training information I dispensed in this podcast, in other episodes, in my articles on the website, and fine-tune your nutrition habits, you can live long and prosper. So there you have it. Hopefully that gives you a positive message that aging isn't the death toll or the final nail in the coffin for any chance of making gains. There is hope. You are in control, and if you do what's needed, you can have a fantastic physique and strength levels and quality of life well past your 40th birthday. Okay, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please share the podcast with anyone you think it will benefit, and spread the word. And like I've said before, if there is a particular topic you want me to dive into and get the details on for you, please get in touch. Drop me a message at tom@breakingmuscle.com or direct message me on Instagram at Tom McCormick, and I will look into the specific areas of interest for you, do the research, and put it together for a podcast episode like this, so we can get you all the details. Okay, that's it from me for today. I look forward to speaking to you soon on another episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast.